Ready for a deep dive, guys? This one's got it all. Love, revolution, enough coffee to fuel a continent. Seriously. We're heading to 1920s Brazil today, following the life of Pedro de Bragança.
We'll be using his unpublished memoir. Gotta love those, right? Plus some historical records to really dig into his story. It's fascinating how his own life mirrors all the crazy stuff happening in Brazil at the time.
It's like we've got excerpts from his life, letters, even accounts of those Tenente revolts, wild times. He's a young guy trying to figure out who he is, where he fits in, all while the world around him is changing.
Exactly, and it all starts on this lavish coffee plantation in Sao Paulo. Imagine, his dad's a big shot in the coffee world, right? Living the good life, but built on the backs of others. Pedro, not so comfortable with that.
Yeah, you can tell it really gets to him, seeing the inequality on the plantation firsthand, especially how his dad treats the workers. There's this sense of shame, helplessness, like he doesn't know what to do about it.
And then there's Rafael. Now, Rafael, he's a worker on the estate, but it's more than that. Pedro grew up with him, almost like a brother, but the memoir, it hints at something more. This attraction, this tension that hangs in the air whenever they're together.
It's like that scene where Pedro's describing watching Rafael shower every morning. You can just feel it, the unspoken longing, like he's battling with himself, his desires, what's considered acceptable, especially back then.
It really highlights the pressure he's under, right? His whole life is tied to this plantation system, but he's developing this empathy for the workers, especially Rafael. It's a tough spot to be in.
And as if his own issues weren't enough, Brazil decides to throw a curveball, the Tenente revolts. Young officers demanding reform, turning the whole system upside down. And for Pedro, it's not just some political debate, it's personal.
Absolutely. These revolts, they become a huge point of contention in his family. His dad, staunch traditionalist, threatened by all this change. Pedro, though, he gets it, sympathizes with the rebels. You can imagine the arguments.
Talk about stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Society that doesn't want to change. A family legacy built on the very thing he's questioning.
And that's where his mother comes in. She's like this calming presence, encouraging him to get an education, see the world beyond the plantation. So off he goes to Europe, a journey that shapes everything for him, especially his beliefs in this, at the time, radical idea, fair trade.
Fair trade. For our listener, what did that even mean back then? This is early 20th century Brazil, not exactly a common concept.
Right. Back then it was revolutionary. Workers, especially on plantations, getting fair wages, decent conditions, respect. It went against everything the industry was built on. Exploitation was the name of the game.
But Pedro, he's drawn to it, even if it's just an idea at this point, right?
And Vienna, that becomes his turning point. He meets Dr. Julian Bauer, this advocate for social justice, really opens Pedro's eyes to just how unequal the whole global coffee trade is. Dr. Bauer helps him connect the dots, see that the life he's always known, the luxury, comes at a human cost.
So Europe, it's like a wake-up call for Pedro.
Absolutely. It's not just about him, sowing his wild oats, although that encounter with Andre in Sao Paulo, well, we'll get into that later. This is about Pedro finding his voice, realizing he can challenge the way things are, even if it means going against his family. Rio's a turning point for him. He starts to figure himself out, what he really wants. But there's this drive in him, this need to make things right, especially with this whole fair trade thing. So England it is. The heart of the coffee world, right?
London, talk about a culture shock. He gets there, head full of ideas, ready to take on these coffee giants, convince them that treating workers fairly isn't just the right thing to do, but good for business too. Easier said than done, though, right?
Oh, yeah. London's got its own set of rules, traditions. It's all about power and money, especially when it comes to industries like coffee, let's just say. Exploiting those faraway places, it was just how things were done.
He's got his work cut out for him, for sure. Oh, and before I forget, we got to talk about that ship encounter.
Yes. William, our handsome ship officer. Let's just say, crossing the Atlantic with him. Well, it adds another dimension to Pedro's journey of self-discovery. The memoir doesn't hold back either. Stolen glances, secret conversations. It's pretty clear that William, well, he represents another step towards Pedro embracing who he really is.
You got to wonder about the pressure back then, even for someone like Pedro, seemingly living the high life. To be yourself, it was a risk, no question.
Absolutely. And those risks, they become even more real in London. He runs into guys like Sir Edmund Fairchild, the old guard of the coffee trade. Stuck in their ways, resistant to change, Fairchild practically laughs at the idea of ethical coffee, sees it as a threat to his profits, his whole world.
But Sir Edmund, he's not the only obstacle Pedro has to face, is he? Tell me more about Lady Emily Sussex. She sounds like quite the character.
Oh, she's a force of nature, that one. Imagine, a woman in her later years, but she uses her wealth, her position, like a weapon, determined to keep her family on top, even if it means manipulating her sons, John and Alfred, to do it. They seem trapped in her web, you know what I mean?
Okay, this is giving serious behind closed doors vibes. Wealthy family, but something's not quite right. What are their stories? John and Alfred.
You're right to sense there's more to it. John's drowning in debt, desperate for his mother's approval. And Alfred, drawn to art, beauty, anything but his family's ruthless ambition. It's like Lady Emily, she squashes anything real, anything genuine, if it doesn't fit her grand plan.
A good reminder that money, status, it doesn't buy happiness, does it? Not even in 1920s London. Speaking of finding your own way, what about Dr. Lawson? He seems different, someone who actually gets what Pedro's trying to do with fair trade.
Dr. Lawson, he's a journalist, sharp as a tack, always searching for the truth. He becomes a crucial ally for Pedro. He sees that fair trade, it's not just some idealistic dream. It could actually work, actually make life better for countless workers trapped in poverty.
Their partnership, it's got to be key to getting the word out right.
Exactly. Lawson's writing, it gives a voice to the voiceless. He lays bare the ugly side of the coffee trade, the human cost behind every cup enjoyed by those fancy Londoners. He connects those consumers with the people who actually grow their coffee, the ones suffering on those plantations. Powerful stuff.
And then there's Thornwell Hall. It's like its own character in all of this, wouldn't you say?
Thornwell Hall. Grand, beautiful, but underneath it all, secrets, lies, desires kept hidden. It's like a tiny snapshot of English society at the time. All proper on the surface, but underneath, oh, it's messy.
That's where Lieutenant Harrington enters the picture, right? Another intriguing character that catches Pedro's eye. Or boy Pedro. Always an interesting company, wouldn't you say?
He has a knack, that's for sure. But with Lieutenant Harrington, it goes deeper than just a fling, The lieutenant, he's haunted by the war, but he finds something in Pedro, a warmth, a passion for life.
And their connection grows against the backdrop of this grand estate, full of its own share of drama.
Right. Remember those secrets, the hidden truths we talked about? Thornwell Hall. That's where it all starts to unravel. It begins with this seemingly harmless game, guests sharing stories, but those stories, they're more confession than entertainment, each one revealing more than they intended.
This is where it turns into a full-blown murder mystery, right?
Huh.
And the victim, none other than Lady Emily Sussex herself. Talk about a game changer.
Oh, yeah. Her death throws everything into chaos. Suspicion falls on everyone, especially her sons. And Pedro, always the observer, he gets pulled into the thick of it, especially when he starts to think Lieutenant Harrington might be involved somehow.
He can't help himself, can he? Always the protector. But before we jump into all the twists and turns, let's talk about the social dynamics at play here. This is 1920s England, right? It all factors in.
Absolutely. This isn't just about who did it, but why. What do those motives tell us about the world Pedro's living in? It's about understanding the rules, the expectations, the prejudices that shaped their choices, even drove them to do the unthinkable.
Last we left off, someone was catching a case at Thornwell Hall. Lady Emily, gone, murdered, and the whole place crawling with secrets and suspicion. But this isn't just some whodunit, it's like we're peeling back the layers of society, one clue, one suspect at a time.
You got it. As our inspector digs into all these tangled relationships, he realizes even that innocent game they were playing, that's a goldmine. Those stories, all those half-truths, they reveal more than anyone intended.
They thought they were being clever, hiding behind metaphors and whatnot, but those words, they come back to haunt them. So how does he crack the case? Where does he even start?
Remember those letters, the ones tucked away, hinting at a forbidden love? Well, it turns out they're more than just gossip fodder. They're the key to it all.
Okay, now those letters, that's classic mystery material right there. So who are the lovebirds? Spill the tea.
The affair. It was between Alfred Sussex and, get this, Arthur Fitzwilliam, the master of Thornwell Hall himself.
No way. Right under everyone's noses. But hold on. How does Lady Emily's murder fit into all of this?
Lady Emily, well, she wasn't one to let little thing like scandal slide, was she? Turns out she found out about the affair, threatened to expose them both, ruin their lives.
Motive. Boom. Someone wanted her silence to protect the secret. But who? Alfred, maybe? Trying to save his relationship? Or maybe someone else got caught in the crossfire.
Our inspector, he's a sharp one. He starts picking up on these little things, the way people act, what they don't say, and it hits him. Arthur Fitzwilliam, he's not just a grieving friend, he's hiding something big.
You're telling me the host, the one who seems so above it all, he's the one?
Exactly. See, Arthur, he's got this reputation, this image to maintain, the thought of a scandal, unthinkable. So he snaps, tries to protect himself, protect his lover, and in the process, well, you know the rest.
Love and fear, toxic combination. What a mess. So what happens to Arthur? And Alfred, poor guy, losing his lover and his mother like that.
Arthur confesses can't live with the guilt. Alfred, he disappears into London, tries to rebuild his life. Talk about a tragic ending.
It really shows how society expectations can push people to do crazy things. But there's a glimmer of hope in all of this, right? Pedro's story doesn't end in darkness, does it?
You're right. Even in the midst of all this drama, there's light. Remember how passionate Pedro was about fair trade? Well, he gets word from Rafael back in Brazil, and it's good news.
Now that's what I like to hear.
Their efforts, they're working. The plantation, it's thriving. Workers are treated better. The coffee's better. Turns out treating people right, it's not just good karma. Even Pedro's father, he starts to come around, see that maybe Pedro was onto something all along.
Okay, but what about Pedro's own happy ending? He finds love.
He does. Rafael, he goes to London looking for a fresh start, and those two, they find their way back to each other. It's a beautiful thing. A reminder that even when things fall apart, love finds a way.
What a story. So what's the takeaway for our listeners today? What have we learned?
I think Pedro's journey, it reminds us to question everything. Don't be afraid to challenge the way things are, to fight for what you believe in, even if it's hard. Embrace who you are. Find your people, the ones who get you, accept you, flaws and all. And never underestimate the power of love. It might sound cheesy, but it can get you through the toughest times.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep those coffee pots brewing.